Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you. My name is Renee Battle Brooks. I'm the Executive Director of the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. We are the county's civil and human rights education and enforcement agency. The Office of Human Rights investigates complaints of civil rights discrimination. We work with combating human trafficking in the county and the region. We oversee the county's language access program, ensuring residents can access county government services in the language of their preference. And we operate an outreach program designed to build understanding across diverse peoples. Over the last 2.5 years, much of our outreach work has been in partnership with the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. And it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight for another in our partnership series, Women in Faith, Diverse Voices Speak. Tonight, we welcome 3 great panelists in conversation on faith and politics. We are a few months out of an election, welcoming in new elected leaders and saying goodbye and thank you to those whose terms have ended. Some campaigns will begin again for Senate seats, for the presidential election, and municipal governments. But what do our faiths tell us about political involvement, about political choices? How do our faiths guide us? How should they guide us? In politics? After all of our great panelists present, we will all join together in conversation. So for those watching at home, please ask questions as they come to you, and we will share them with the speakers during our panel discussion. So our first speaker this evening is Rabbi Abbi Sharofsky. She is the Jewish Community Relations Council's Director of Intergroup Relations and Rabbi in Residence. She studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary and was ordained in 2012. Abby also holds a master's degree from the Davidson School of Jewish Education, specializing in experiential education. Abby was the deputy director of the Jewish Welfare Board, Jewish Chaplains Council, where she worked with Jewish military personnel and veterans. Rabbi Sharofsky is the recipient of the 2016 J-Pro Young Professional Award for her dedication to the Jewish community through her work in the not-for-profit field. She is a 2018 Fellow of Rabbis Without Borders Fellow. So thank you, Rabbi Abby. We welcome you to provide some remarks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Renee. It's great to be here with everyone today, this evening, and great to be back with this phenomenal group of women talking about a very timely and an important issue of how our faith, I don't know if the word influences is right, but how our faith shapes and has a place within some of these larger political issues and the politics of our time. So I would just like to say, as with any political discussion, these are my opinions. These are not the opinions of my organization necessarily, although unless I specifically cite, and the JCRC of Greater Washington is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. So putting that all out there, all of those disclaimers. But what does it mean to have to be a Jewish person, to be a Jewish woman, and look at politics and look at what is happening right now in the political arena? And there are many different areas of there are many different places where Jewish thought, Jewish law, Jewish philosophies over time have something to say about how we act as Jews, how we act in a public space, how we conduct ourselves in business, how we conduct ourselves with each other, other people. And there are lots of pieces that come up of what does it mean to have a practice of fair wage, have a practice of one set of laws for all people, not just people within your religion, people of all faiths, of all nationalities and backgrounds. What does it mean to treat those who are within our, those who we employ, to treat them a certain way and to have a certain amount of understanding of human dignity, and what does it mean to use those ideals to guide us in who we are looking to elect, who we hope to interact with, how we advocate for others in different political spaces. And there's also the strong reality of what's happening right now, and what does it mean as a Jewish person in this country today. And to be very frank, as a Jewish woman, times are hard. What's going on now in terms of how our country is understanding various laws, especially those around reproductive choice, prayer, displays of how we live our religious lives, how we live our faith, is very challenging to many Jews. And it is a struggle. It's definitely hard to, what does it mean for me as a Jewish person to understand religious liberty and to understand where my religious freedoms and religious liberties play in when the Supreme Court or other legal entities are saying, no, this is what religious liberty is. And that doesn't take my beliefs and my practices into consideration. So that's a really hard, it's a hard reality right now. And I'm really grateful to be here to be able to discuss some of these pieces and hope to get into some of those details a little bit more. And I want to just call on this one idea that always sticks out for me as a Jewish person, this idea of Dina de Malchute Dina, that the law of the land is the law that I follow as a Jewish person, and that struggle and that tension. So what does it mean for me that I am an American? I follow US law, I follow, and I hold true to that, even when there is, when there are issues that are popping up and there are questions. That struggle, though, of what does it mean to be sort of compelled by my faith to respect and adhere to laws, and then also know at the same time that those laws are in such contrast to the ideals that are being held up by my faith. So that's a tension that I'm living in right now.
Yeah, so well put. And I hope that we will unpack a little bit of that tension, because I think maybe we'll find that there are some commonalities across. So very well put. Thank you so much. So we're going to have you back in a few minutes to talk through with the panel. But next we're going to hear from Reverend Janelle Johnson. She is currently serving at a cabinet level agency as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer to lead President Biden's Executive Order number 14035. I probably said that wrong. To further diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workplace. Prior to federal service, she worked for several technology companies, including a 7-year tenure at Lockheed Martin, where she was promoted several times and served as a corporate diversity manager. In 2014, her commitment to social justice, education, and equality led her to an appointment as a commissioner by the county executive in Prince George's County, and that was to the Human Relations Commission, now the Office of Human Rights, the civil rights agency for the county, to investigate and enforce all federal discrimination laws within its jurisdiction. She was elected as vice chair of the same commission in 2017 and served until October 2019. As an advocate, she moderated a panel discussion at the 2019 Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Annual Legislative Conference. As a part of her commitment to continuous learning, she earned a certificate in theology and ministry from Princeton Theological Seminary in 2017. She holds a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from George Mason University, a Master of Science degree in business from Johns Hopkins University, and a Master of Studies in Law degree from the George Washington University School of Law. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So, Reverend Johnson, please, we welcome your comments.
Thank you so much. And I neglected to share with you all that I serve at Reed Temple AME Church in Glendale, Maryland. And this is such a timely discussion. I agree with Rabbi Abbi. This is such a timely discussion. And as I was kind of centering myself and preparing tonight, I was thinking about the fact that when you're talking about someone's faith, I just want to start with that piece first. When you're talking about someone's faith, we have to be incredibly sensitive. It's a delicate topic when you talk about someone's faith, because you're talking about why they show up in the world, why they get up, their sense of purpose. And that can be a very delicate and sensitive topic. I mean, we essentially are talking about someone's sense of being in terms of their faith. And so, I was doing some research, and a high number of Americans share, people in this country, and I'm going to be kind of ethnocentric in this moment, but some people do have the same belief as their parents. Nearly, I think the research says nearly 43% of people in this country share the same belief with their parent, while 8% say that their belief is different from their parent. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of what we believe comes from our culture, what we've been exposed to, and what we've heard. When we start talking about politics, I also did some research and found that roughly 3/4 of kids who have two parents of the same party will fall on the same end of the political spectrum as their parents. And so when we talk about faith and we talk about politics, it's a conversation that can tangentially touch on culture, geographic location, and race. And so our faith and our faith guides our politics based on what we've seen and based on what we've heard. And so when I say that, I mean, what did we hear from our families? What messages are reinforced? And I would argue that really, although it really should, our politics are really not totally guided by what's written in our respective holy texts. It's really guided by what have we heard? What have we been exposed to? What messages are reinforced, right? And so I would suggest that faith should have a role in our politics from the standpoint that it guides us in being grounded in morality and ethics as we make decisions about who we vote for or our candidate of choice. But I do see the genius in the First Amendment, the freedom of religion. And I just want to say this from the outset, that no one political party can have a hold on a particular faith, tradition, or religion, meaning, if you're a Christian, you must vote one political party. And I think I believe that we are in dangerous territory when we say things like, well, if you're a good Christian, you vote this way. If you're a good Muslim, you vote this way. If you're a good Jew, you vote this way. That should not be. And so I'm going to just put this out there and just be really bold and say that I believe that we're in a very dangerous territory in our body politic. And so the question is, how do we as a society navigate our way out of that? How do we create that space, that brave space, that safe space where people can show up in their faith tradition and vote for however they want to? And so I think that's going to be a great discussion that we can have tonight and unpack that. How do we get here and how do we navigate our way through it? So this is a great conversation, and I'm really excited to be a part of this panel with my sister panelists and to be a part of this great conversation tonight.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, I think we're going to have time to unpack that, because that is so, I agree with you, so foundational as to where we are. Thank you, Reverend Janelle. We'll bring you back in just a minute. And last but not least, we are pleased to have with us Rahmah Abdulaleem. She is the Executive Director of Karama, Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights, where she works to create a global network of advocates knowledgeable about the gender equitable principles of Islam and are able to advance the cause of Muslim women's rights in legal and social environments. She advocates for civil rights, religious freedom, empowerment, and justice for women. She graduated from Duke University with a double major in religion and sociology with a certificate in markets and management studies. Ms. Abdulaleem obtained her JD from the University of Michigan Law School and worked at a top international corporate law firm for 14 years. So thank you, Ms. Abdulaleem. We look forward to your.
Thank you so much for having me. I just loved what Rabbi Abbi and Reverend Janelle have already spoken about, and I think we have so much to build on just their initial presentations. For me, as a Muslim woman, Karama really kind of means dignity. And so for those who don't speak Arabic, Karama means dignity. And it comes from our holy book, chapter 17, verse 70. We have given dignity to the children of Adam. And for us at Karama, it's really important that it says children of Adam. It just doesn't say men. It just doesn't say women. It says all the children of Adam. And inspired by this verse is our mission to really strive towards a day where everyone is treated equally, it can reach their full potential because they have been treated with respect and compassion. And today, too often in politics, what is missing is respect and compassion. We are so stuck in our positions of, I must be right. The other person is not just wrong, but evil. And that has really caused so many issues. As a Muslim and probably as being a member of a minority faith here in the United States, I am very concerned when I start hearing words about evil and you must not be right because you don't belong to this group and America is a Christian country or a Judeo-Christian country. My heckles get up. And I really, as a lawyer, I'm like, that's not true. That is not our tradition here in America. We have freedom of religion. We have separation of church and state. And right now we're getting to a point that it seems like people are forgetting that we have that separation. And not just any people, the Supreme Court, who is like really, the law of the land is really from the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court has forgotten that there's a separation, where are we going? It's really kind of, okay, if they're really directing the car and they're driving, we're like, whoa, 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 we're the passengers. Where are you taking us? Too often, the minority faiths or people without faiths are really forgotten in the discussion. And there have been so many recent court cases where they're like, well, this is how things are. And you're like, that's not true for everyone's faith. That might be true for a particular specific faith, but that's not true for everyone's faith. And when laws are starting to be based on a specific religious tradition, that's a slippery slope. It is really a slippery slope that do we want to go that way as a country? And our founding fathers, and we all know that they were only fathers, they were only white land-owning members, they were very, very strong in their belief that there should be a separation of church and state. We all know the stories that we heard in history class. I'm not going to characterize them any way other than that, of how America came to be and how people were escaping religious persecution. It's so fascinating that is what we learned at a fear of a certain age. That's all you learned growing up, was that religious persecution, and they came over and they found this land and, they started America. It was all based on, I needed to be able to practice my religion. I was being persecuted. I think it's fascinating that 200 years later, we are really going back in the wrong direction. We are really starting to put in ways too much faith, because faith is personal. It is a personal thing that people have, and it does direct how someone lives their life. But should my faith interact or really overcome your faith because I'm in charge? And that's something we really need to start thinking about. Is it okay that, this is a view of a certain group and everyone's going to have to follow it? There are certain things that everyone can agree on. I agree that there's certain things that, oh, that's in the Bible. That's in every holy text. It's not just in the Bible. It's not just in the Torah. It's not just in the Quran. I can't always be like, well, in the Quran, it says this, and that means that you are evil and you're doing something wrong. We have to get to the point where we're treating everyone, regardless of their religious tradition or lack of religious tradition, with respect and compassion. And until we start treating our fellow humans with the level of respect and compassion that all of our religious traditions really focus on, almost, you can't tell me of a religious tradition that says, that does not focus on love and really how to be a better human. All the religious traditions, that's the aim of it. As a religion major, that's what I found. It was like the aim was for us all to be better humans. And for us to really have forgotten that, because politics have become so polarized, and we're so polarized to say, I'm right, and you're not just wrong, but you're evil. And so I would love to have that discussion tonight on how politics is really kind of got subset by like, oh, my faith is right, and really trying to turn us back to a position of my faith is, for me, and I love my fellow humans, but politics and faith should not really be integrated the way they have become integrated.
Excellent. Thank you. So we have a lot to discuss. So while we're waiting, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. While we're bringing the others back, outstanding. I think, and if I may, if I could just call everyone by the first name, is that okay? Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. I think that Janelle started down this path, so I'll let her go last. But I think we should first have, what is the definition of politics? Like, what are we talking about, right? Because Janelle did say, that it comes from the community, right? It's about things that you hear or things that you're exposed to. So maybe let's start there. What is this thing? Because then we can see whether this thing and religion go together or not, or how it informs. So Abby, how about, seeing you were the first to go, like, what are you thinking when you say politics?
That's a big question. Yeah. And Janelle, I really liked how you put it of this. There's no, like, this isn't the right way to vote if you're this religion, or, oh, all X vote Y. No, and I think that too often we get, different groups get pigeonholed into, well, if, looking at the Jewish community, oh, all Jews are going to vote for this, or they're always going to side with this entity or that ideal. And it's not only is that wrong, it starts to border on, being problematic, and at times, unfortunately, getting into, hate speech or anti-Semitism of, what does it mean to increase? What does it mean to have these stereotypes about how people are, voting or who they're supporting? So then, what does politics mean? There is that complicated piece of, yes, I grew up with parents telling me, women can do all kinds of things. I'm a rabbi, so I got here somehow. And that my voice means something, and equality means something, and equity means something. And I do think there is that sort of internal nourishment of who we are, but then there's also this finding a voice and a place. And I think, for me, and especially as a member of the clergy, politics can't just take one. It can't just take one spot or one piece. It's so nuanced, because there's so much riding on it. It feels like, yep. How am I representing me? What am I representing about my organization? What am I representing about, all Jews in the world ever? Like, that's the craziness that ends up happening. And I think what you were saying, Rahmah, about, we start to pile on too much, it's, I'm not carrying all of the opinions of the Jewish people. That I tap out on that one. So this.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Rama, your thoughts. And it is a huge question, but
Well, when I think of politics, I think of the legislative branch. I really think of the legislative branch and decisions being made about for everyone. From the government. I think of government services really close to being politicians. They're to me one step down, and I can say that my sister's the government work. So, but I really think of politics as that like legislative branch, as that like decision making, and it's to me, it was meant to be people who are making decisions for everyone for the greater good. And I question whether or not all decisions now are being made for the greater good. And the ideals that it was set up to, like represent the people and, 2 senators per state and representatives based on geographic area. I think we've lost some of that with some of the gerrymandering of the maps and who's in control of what state house. And, like people on the coast think totally different than middle America. And they're crazy because they're on the coast in those big cities with, smog. And if they lived truer to the earth, like middle America, they would think differently. I mean, I think that that's all kind of created by like the legislative branch and kind of where we gotten to the point where that's how we're like really kind of conditioned to be like, okay, all of that is politics. And, all of us right here in this group are kind of right near the DMV. People are like, in DC, that's your problem. You guys are all kind of infected by politics. And so I think politics is really all of the big decisions that are being made for everyone by the small group of people compared to how many people are in the United States. This small group of people and lobbyists and the people who work for are making decisions for everyone. And I think that that's when I say politics, I'm thinking of, the legislative branch.
Yeah, no, that's great. Janelle, did you want to add to what you sort of already unpacked that? But
yeah, when I think about politics, just like what Rama was saying, I think of the government. I think of governing. I think of bills. I think of legislation that's going to impact a group of citizens. When I think of the body politic, I think I spoke about that a little earlier. I think about a collective group of citizens that are going to be impacted by said legislation. Bye, honey. I'm sorry. My husband was saying goodbye to me. Apologize about that. But that's what I think about. And I think about how legislative decisions impact a group of people, both adversely or maybe benefits them. That's what I think about when I think of politics. And I think that it's become quite muddied, which is why I think this conversation is so timely, because I think it's become muddied with special interest, particular groups of faith or, lobbyists for certain areas of interest. And so I think that with the founding fathers, just to piggyback on what Rama is saying, I don't believe that this was their intention, despite of the ills that were going on when they formed the Constitution. I don't think that they had this in mind in terms of how our politics would be influenced by so many different areas of influence, whether it be religion or faith, or however you want to categorize it. So,
yeah, and everybody's sort of said this. I think there seems to be consensus that we all agree that there seems to be an element of using religion in politics, right? And so let's just look at history in this country. I was just listening to a really great podcast that really talks about how sort of Christian nationalism is not new.
it's not.
Right? You can trace it, the 40s and how it, and all of this. And so I guess, and the question is, how do we as leaders, right? Because each of you is a leader. We're all, leaders of different things. How do we as leaders help people understand or how do we keep from allowing that use?
Can I just jump all on top of that? I feel like, and forgive me for being so blunt, but I feel like as a society, we're being, for lack of a better word, played.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is we touch on one particular topic that is maybe sensitive to one particular community. So we're going to talk about abortion, and we're going to get this group all ginned up. And then we're going to talk about a woman's rights. We're going to get this group over here ginned up. And now let them fight. Instead of not having a thoughtful discussion about reproductive rights, or having a thoughtful discussion about what does it mean to be pro-life, and how can we come to some consensus. I heard a pastor say, a very well, actually I'll say it because it's on the internet. I heard Bishop Jake say this, and it was so powerful. He says, yes, I'm pro-life, but I also have a challenge when the woman does have the child and there are no resources to help her have the child if she's unable to care for the baby. So how do we reconcile this? Yes, I'm pro-life, but I'm also pro-life out when the child is out of the womb too. And how do we reconcile the two? And it's a very delicate, and I hope I didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable, but I wanted to kind of draw that sharp contrast specifically with the recent decision by the court regarding a woman's right to choose. And so, you know, I think that we would have more thoughtful conversations like this if we could kind of step back from the hysteria of the differences between our belief system and the politics of it all, and just have a thoughtful conversation about how do we do life and how do we do it really well.
Yeah. And if I just jump in before the others answer, is it really our belief systems, or are we told that this is what we believe as Christians, this is what we believe as Muslims, this is what we believe as Jewish people, right? Mm-hmm. Is it really? Because isn't that really what this is about, this discussion? So how do we, I won't say wake people up, but how do we get people to understand that, you know, sometimes we are pawns, just as you said, you get this group going, right? Because you're navigating, you know what you want as, you know, as a politician, you know what your end game is. And if you can, right? So let's talk to that, because that might help get to your question, you know, Janelle, that you raised in your presentation.
So along the lines of that question of, you know, is there one, or is that is there one answer, or how do we understand the different practices of what does it mean to step beyond the politics and the divisiveness of something, and to look at the guidance that we get from our faith. I saw the question in the chat about reproductive rights, and where, you know, what is the Jewish, you know, the quote unquote Jewish view on this. And I think there is something that's very important to understand about not just what is necessarily what Judaism, or, you know, Jewish writing, Jewish rabbinic thought thinking and saying about this, but also what does it mean that the narrative is currently being held by one group who is claiming ownership over an ideal. And that ideal is what happens at conception, what does life mean, and what is and when does personhood start? Mm-hmm. And rather than stepping out of all of those questions, and Janelle, as you were speaking, I was thinking, yes, the point that the pastor was making was not about being pro-life. It was what he was describing was earlier. That's, you know, you can be pro-birth. What about what happens after? Because if you're not thinking about the rest of the life of that child and that child's family, what have you saved? What have you helped? And I think about that a lot. But I will give the, you know, what does the Jewish community say, knowing that the Jewish community is not a monolith. There is no one specific answer. And at our earliest texts, you know, within the book of Exodus in the Torah, it does talk about saving the life of the mother in a case that first and foremost, her life is to be prioritized over the unborn child. So as we think about today, as we think about people who are pregnant, people who have the ability to get pregnant, and what does it mean for someone who's carrying a fetus to be put in that situation of whose life is, how is life considered, and what is the status of one over another? We do have a fundamental text to guide us. And then there are, I'm happy to point to resources in other spaces because I could talk for a very long time about this. But there is that question of how come my fundamental beliefs about what is life, when it begins, and how a fetus is counted and regarded, why is that not given the same amount of respect as what another person of a different belief system thinks about the same issue?
Rabbi Abbi, I'm right there with you, because Reverend Janelle, when you said played, I usually say gaslighting. I felt like we have been gaslighted on these topics for so long. And so even when Rabbi Abbi was talking about, all Jewish people are not a monolith, I say that about Muslims all the time. We have different schools of thought. We have different views on when life begins. And what we don't all agree on is that life begins at conception. And so that was my big issue when the Supreme Court case came down. My antenna went up when they said, "Oh, there's no dispute. Life begins at conception." What? Who? Where did that come from? Mm-hmm. And the fact that they just slipped that in as if it was kind of like the sky is blue, everybody agrees. Mm-hmm. That's the way they made the statement, was that this is a fact that everyone supports. And it wasn't, oh, medical view says that this is when life it was, all of us believe that. And it's a part of our belief system as Americans. And that's part of the problem. And I think that what is interesting was that I saw an interview with Justice Breyer. Mm-hmm. And someone asked him about, did you guys think about, other religious communities? He said, I don't think anybody brought it up. And the person was like, no, several amicus briefs were filed on that issue. But it was amazing how that issue wasn't even really thought of, because it wasn't priority for those 9 Supreme Court justices. It did not personally affect them. Mm-hmm. And I think, in answer to Renee's question, it's education more than anything else. Because so many times people don't realize that their faiths are being played, that they are being taken on a ride. Because if we think about all of the ills that have happened over the years, I wrote an article for an ABA paper, and I called it Not Those People. And people are like, oh, she must be talking about LGBTQ. And I wrote a bunch of statements that were used to keep segregation going. Like, you can't use my water fountain. You can't use my bathroom. I don't want those people in my house. Those were the same things that were used to keep African Americans segregated from everybody else, that are now being used for LGBTQ plus people. And people, until they hear it, they're like, oh, you're right. I didn't really think about it that way. Mm-hmm. But you get so stuck in not even thinking about it, like, no, it says in the Bible right here, this, you know what? But they're using these same things over and over again. And people use all holy books, because it's not just like, oh, people are using the Bible. People use the Quran all the time. You're like, this is what the Quran says right here. And that's why you guys hate everybody else. It's like, did you read the verses before and after? Did you see that there are stories, that these are analogies being made? Did you see all that? So really, I think it's a matter of education. I think that we need to educate people about what their faiths say, for people to, I think some people have a faith and they don't even know what their faiths mean, because the number of Muslims who came up to me and was like, oh, I'm pro-life. I'm like, I thought you followed this school of thought. Did you know in that school of thought, that's not actually correct? Oh, really? I didn't know that. And that's why I think that people are always amazed that they were like, oh, you guys haven't been really active in the pro-life or pro-choice movement. Well, for Muslims, this was a private matter. This was something that would never even gotten to a government level. It would have been between a husband and wife, because of course nobody has sex outside of marriage for Muslims. I'm joking, but that's where they go. So a husband and wife maybe the imam if they wanted to, but it would be a personal decision with a doctor. It would not even come to a government level. And that's what I tell people when they say, what's the Muslim view? It's like, well, the Muslim view is that this is a private decision and not a public decision. And that is kind of how Muslims see things slightly differently on a lot of topics that don't go to the point where the government should be involved. And so, in answering your question, Renee, I think education is the key.
And I also just want to add one piece when you say even, I think one of the key pieces that the Jewish community is agreeing on about issues like abortion, specifically abortion, and reproductive rights, is that this is a conversation between a family, however we're defining a family, and their rabbi, for Jews. This is, if God forbid there's an issue when a woman is pregnant and there's an issue with the fetus, and that's between her and her rabbi. That's not between her rabbi and the Supreme Court. And that's a key piece of what does it mean when we talk about religious liberty, to be able to know that we have, as clergy, that I have that freedom to counsel someone, and that a family has that freedom to go to the person they trust to give them that sense of spiritual guidance and courage, right then, in that extremely vulnerable time. That's what they're preventing us from doing. And that's a big problem for any faith.
Yeah, I agree with Daniel Hamlin's comment. As a Christian minister, I have a strong negative reaction whenever someone says, this is the Christian view. Even if I agree. I think, so much bad and evil has been done in the name of religion, whichever faith throughout history. We can track it for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And so how do we guard against, kind of what both Janelle and Abby brought up, and that is the otherism, right? Through our religious lens, through our faith lens. Because as we've all said, isn't that, each of our faiths and the faiths teach, that the otherism and putting somebody down is actually the antithesis of what religions or faiths really believe. So how do we guard against? What do we do? If you vote this way, then that you are evil, or right? How do we then guard against that through the lens of our faith? Especially if somebody that you admire or look up to in your faith is giving you a different message.
I think we have to be intentional. And I say we have to be intentional about engaging with people who think differently. I think right now in our politics, in our body politic, in our culture, society, however you want to define it, we're in our tribes right now. And I'm going to listen to everything that confirms my own biases. I'm going to listen to everything that confirms what I believe. And I am not going to be intentional, engage with others who think differently than me, have a different political party or particular persuasion than me. I'm just not engaging with people who think differently than me. And I think the way that we kind of course correct is engaging with people who think differently, who believe differently, and force yourself to sit there, actively listen, not to respond, but actively listen to hear the different perspectives. Again, because our faith is so deeply rooted in who we are and our purpose and our sense of being and why we're here. And so when we get stuck in, okay, this is what I believe and this is the only way to believe and everyone else is bad, right? We other people. Right. And it leads to misunderstandings. Right. Because if I say, OK, I'm a Christian, I can't engage with somebody who's Sikh or who believes differently, then I other that person. Right. And then I miss the opportunity to expand my understanding. I was looking at this is shortly after the George Floyd situation a couple of years ago. And there was a pastor who was a white gentleman who said, okay, we have to start talking more and at least give people the opportunity to share their perspective. And so he was talking, and it was a diverse panel. And he was talking about this experience after George Floyd that he was invited to speak. The first question that they asked him was, "Did you vote for Trump?" And so they didn't want to, and he said he kind of paused for a second. He said, "Well, you know what? Let's just go there." And he considered himself to be a conservative. He said, "But we have to get to a place where can I at least come and share with you what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling, instead of saying, 'Oh, you voted for Trump, so can't talk to you.'" And so that's why we're in this dangerous place right now, because we're not allowing people to share, and we're not being intentional, to engage with people who think differently. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that you put yourself in a position where you will be disrespected because of your faith. I'm certainly not saying that. But what I am saying is be intentional about listening. Be intentional about embracing. Be intentional about making sure that we don't other people who believe differently, but embrace them as an opportunity to learn something different.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, Rahmah? Or
just say that we're in danger of losing a whole generation. Young people will come to you right away. "Oh, I'm spiritual, not religious." And as someone who is religious, I want them to be religious. I don't want them to just be spiritual. But we are pushing them to that point by doing the echo chamber that Reverend Janelle talked about, is that we are not listening to them, because they're the first people we should be listening to, because they've been exposed to so many different things that we never were exposed to. I can't imagine having access to as much information as they do nowadays as the child, and how confused I would be. But really listening to them, answering their questions, and not just saying, "Well, because you're supposed to. This is what we believe because you're in my family and this is what we're supposed to." My grandmother, bless her heart, she let all of her children be who they were. She ended up having a child who was a Buddhist, a couple of Catholic sons. My father is her Muslim son. She has a couple of, Baptists, but she was just like, whatever you want to be, you need to be a good person. So if that's what you want to do, you be a good person. And so she listened. And I was like, she did this 50 years ago, and we're still not doing it now. We need to start listening to our kids, because if we don't listen to them, we're going to lose a whole generation who's like, "Oh, I can't go down." I mean, look how disrespectful they are to, my friend, because my friend is, Hindu and is, and I'm a Muslim, so I can't be friends with this person because my father said I can't be friends with them, or I can't be friends with that Christian, or, because of who they are. And so really, we need to start listening to kids, because as children, they start playing with everyone. It isn't until they get older and they get kind of like, "Oh, I was told I'm not supposed to like you." We really have to build on that kind of childhood wonder of learning about other people and being interested to learn about other people and just listening to people. I think if we start listening to people, I think that we would have a totally different world. And if women were in charge too, but that's a whole different discussion for another day. But if women were in charge of politics, we would be going in a different direction.
Yes.
right.
So I feel like I'm going to be like the little rain cloud here in a bit on it. Yes, I agree with everything that Janelle and Rahmah have just said. I also think that there's this piece that gets kind of ignored in a way of it, and as a member of a minority faith, I think it's important that we call out, and that people who carry different privileges in this world learn to speak out and address it. So I've spent time trying to understand and address and check my own white privilege when I carry it, and how it presents. But one of the things that I struggle with is having people understand their Christian privilege. And what does it mean to be the dominant faith in this country at this point in history? And when you're a member of a minority faith, and I hold these pieces of what it means to be a Jew, to be a Jewish person, to be a Jewish woman who has white skin, and how what that means as I navigate through this world. that's a constant challenge. And it's a challenge of there are times when I can, move with more privilege, and there are a lot of times, and it's coming up more and more, that I can move through with less. And I need my Christian allies to speak up and stand up when they're seeing their privilege play out. It can't just be the Jewish community speaking up for the Jewish community, the Muslim community speaking up for the Muslim community, and, and so on. And while we may be in coalition together on certain things, like if we need to get something done for, say, a calendar to make sure that there's a faith inclusive calendar that includes Yom Kippur and Eid and Diwali, I know who to partner with. And that's great, because the minority faith groups, we can all come together and we can get that done. But it's solidified when our Christian partners are standing up and saying, yes, this is important for us too. And the more that we can understand how those different privileges are playing out through politics, and that I think Christians, like several people have said here, there is not one Christian voice. And I'm using, the faith that I have and the faith that I've been taught to make sure that all faiths are being heard and lifted up, not just mine. That's what I need. That's what I need from allies. And that's what I need in conversations like this one. And I've so felt it tonight. So you guys are awesome, as always. It's that elephant that I feel like we never, and not a political elephant, don't worry, that I have to call out and I have to talk about, because if I'm not going to talk about it with this group, where can I talk about it?
I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I'm so glad that you remind us of our privilege. And that there is a responsibility to use your privilege. Because that's why have it? Why, if you're not going to do anything to help the world, to help us, all of our journeys, then yeah. So thank you for reminding us about that.
Can I share something with you, Rabbi Abbi?
Abby is fine. We're cool.
Abby, okay. I was trying to be extra, careful. No, but I want to share something with you. I had a professional experience around the holidays. People get really comfortable because everyone's really excited about the holidays. And I had a professional experience where I had to say to leaders who didn't mean any harm. They were just kind of going about their thing, doing what they do. And they were saying, as we get ready for Christmas holidays, make sure you do this, blah, 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 blah. And, Christmas is coming, blah, blah, blah. And so I also saw some communications where I saw for the Christmas break. And so I had to stand up in a meeting to people who are a little more senior ranking, who have more close ties to the White House than I do. And I had to say, hey, I know this is an exciting time of year for everyone, but we need to be mindful that we're certainly embracing inclusion. There may be some people that don't celebrate Christmas. They may celebrate Kwanzaa, or they may celebrate Hanukkah. And let's make sure that we're inclusive in our language. And when I said that, oh, you're right. And then there was a change. So sometimes you don't have to come in with your hammer. You can just kind of explain, listen, we want to make sure that we're inclusive. And I did see a change. So I have those positive experiences too, being an ally. And really, but again, it's something that's always in my forethoughts because I'm a DEI officer. That's what I do.
Exactly.
Right. But it's modeling that type of behavior. And who in that meeting maybe heard me and then carried it out somewhere else that I may never know about. Maybe in a different setting, they said the same thing. So, it's those types of experiences where we are intentional. I guess that's the word for me tonight. Yeah. Intentional, where we're intentional about what we do and in terms of making a change. So I want to thank you for sharing that, Abby, tonight, because it brought me back to that experience where I am taking ownership of, I have to be an ally. I have to demonstrate through my own leadership opportunity or privilege, my leadership privilege, to be able to say, let's make sure that we're fully inclusive.
To your point, to both of your points, I have sort of watched, and we all have, so this is not just me, right? but we have watched the weaponization in a political way of Merry Christmas versus Happy Holiday, right? And it's just sort of strikes me as an example of what we're talking about, right? Of that wedge, right? And now, you know, instead of saying happy holiday season, like if you're really, you know, you're going to say Merry Christmas with such, right? Like in your face. So, yeah. I think we should end. I'm sorry. Did you have something?
I mean, I will say I love Christmas. I love the joy that it can bring for people, and I love watching it like as a friend. And if I know that someone's celebrating Christmas, I want to wish them a Merry Christmas. I also want people to realize that there are like 30 some holidays in the months of November and December into January that are happening, and there may be more than one. And Hanukkah is not a Jewish Christmas. So don't put the same weight on my holidays that you put on yours.
Right.
So it's like you said, it's being intentional. And yes, everything Janelle just said, just ditto.
Yeah. It is interesting about Christmas because Christmas, you know, to some, it's not a religious holiday.
And I would say, I was just going to mention that there are some Muslims who will celebrate Christmas and they're like, oh, it's an American holiday. And I was like, who told you that? Did you not know what no, it's an American holiday. I know several Muslims who have Christmas trees, who give their kids Christmas gifts, and they're just like, no, it's an American holiday. I was like, really? But it's really, it depends on what community you're in. And in your community, if you are like, you know what, all I saw growing up was Christmas everywhere, and I knew I was an American if I celebrated Christmas, and I want to be an American, so you know, I'm going to celebrate Christmas as well. I actually think it's very fascinating because for Muslims, it depends on really your, you know, ethnic group, whether or not you celebrate Christmas here in the US, just because, you know, what your relationship is to what you consider to be an American.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Yeah. And I love Daniel Hamlin's comment. What if the person with whom we disagree is also created in the image of
God?
Right? Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I believe we're all created in the image of God, whatever we believe. I believe that firmly, wholeheartedly.
So,
all created in the image of God.
That's right.
Yeah.
Whatever name we use for God, actually, right?
Yeah, we're all creating an image. I did want to share something with you where I had a challenge, and I know we got to close out really soon. But I struggled when I was in my law program because there were certain things that we were studying that I couldn't reconcile with my faith. And I struggled. And I remember I had to come to terms with, okay, so when the Supreme Court is making a decision or coming to a decision, they're not discussing 1 Corinthians, which is the book in the New Testament. They're not. They're talking about matters of law. What does the Constitution say, right? And whether you are an originalist, I can't speak tonight, originalist, you know what I'm trying to say, or if you believe it's a living document, they are not talking about, or at least according to our Constitution, they shouldn't be talking about matters of Scripture. And so that is what helped me in my law program, because I was really struggling one semester about how do I reconcile this? How do I respond to this test question and be true to my faith and true to who I am and show up as my true self? And I had to reconcile that. There's God's law, and then there's man's law. And you're being tested on man's law. So answer with man's law.
Yeah, exactly. The law professors are not going to go on God's law.
No, that's right. So I think for me, a big takeaway is remembering my privilege because my faith is Christianity. So remembering that and using it powerfully, using it, not just sitting on the fence. So I'm going to ask each of you what takeaway, so that maybe others also had a takeaway. So Abby, what's your takeaway?
I'm gonna go with the, how are we being intentional in these discussions? That struck me tonight. So I'm taking that word, Janelle, and I'm gonna take that one with me.
Excellent, thank you. Rama.
Effective listening, because because I'm a lawyer, I'm always ready for a response, and sometimes I miss what's being said. And I think so many of us miss what's being said because we're ready with a response. Because we're like, they're going to say this and I'm going to respond this way. And you don't even hear what they say. And so effective listening. And I just hope that people take that away. It's like, we have to listen to each other because we're talking to each other, but we're not listening. And if we're not listening, we can't go forward. Just talking to each other doesn't work if we're not listening and taking in what people are saying so that we can understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, excellent. Janelle.
For me, it was something that Abby said that made my brain kind of percolate a little bit. And when she said, we're not a monolith. Mm-hmm. And we have to operate with that in our mind. No particular community, no particular people within a faith are a monolith. Everyone has a different opinion. Everyone has a different perspective. Why? Because we've had different lived experiences. And we bring that into our faith. We bring that into our interactions with people. And the thing I constantly say to myself, we live in a democracy, not a theocracy.
Yeah. No, thank you. Well, this has been great, ladies. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Abbi, Reverend Janelle, Attorney Rahmah.
It's never enough time. It's never enough time.
I know. But hopefully with some of the questions that each of you raised in your presentation, even though we didn't directly talk about it, we talked around it to maybe give each of us guidance and those listening. So thank you. We want to thank everyone else who participated, who joined us, took an hour, a little bit more of your precious time to spend with us, to learn and to grow and to share and to hopefully get you thinking about something in a different way. So we want to thank, as always, our fabulous panelists. So thank you again for you spending your time with us and preparing for this tonight. Thank you for your words, your wisdom. Thank you for everything that you shared. I think we'll all be thinking about this the rest of this week and as we continue our journey. We want to always thank our partners, the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. So thank you. And please visit us at the Office of Human Rights at civilrights.mypgc.us, and maybe Kyla will put it on there. And please visit the library at pgcmls.info/events. And you can see what events are coming up that we are jointly doing. So stay tuned. This panel of this particular series that we do, Women of Faith, please, you'll see them again. So please come back. So thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous evening as I ramble. Bye-bye.
This is great.